So, welcome everyone to this session. Today, we are starting these sessions by looking at communication skills. So, in this session, we'll look at the definition of communication and its elements, the importance of communication skills in various contexts, and then we'll be able to identify and apply the principles of effective communication, and then demonstrate the different uh, communication styles and strategies. And then at the end of it all, you should be able to look at your own communication, identify the strength that you have and areas where you need to improve and how you can improve. So that's what we are going to look at. Basically, in this orientation program, we have a number of topics that we shall cover, and this is the first one. We'll also look at writing skills. We'll also look at academic skills. We should also look at life skills. Uh, at every stage of these sessions, will basically be relating these concepts to what we do at Ristal. Okay, so if we talk about communication, how do you apply the knowledge that you have learned in this topic to your communications to your communication with the Ristal University, with your course coordinators, with the finance people, with the support team? How do you communicate? We want to see that come out in your communications with us. Very often, you will be writing emails. You'll be even writing WhatsApp messages, for example. But all this should demonstrate to us, or should show that you're actually a person who learned uh, communication skills in your orientation. Um, as a as a person, I'm always very, 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 very strict in terms of communication. If you don't write proper emails, I will not respond to you. If you don't follow the proper format of writing reports, of sending assignments, we will not grade you until you learn the things that you are supposed to do. So basically, this session is basically preparing you for the journey that you're going to have with Bristol University. So if you're going to be writing emails to us, you understand that you need to be extremely professional and always formal in your communication. You should know always who to communicate to, how you address them, avoiding using informal words, ones that are not professional and things like that. These are elements that we'll be continuously talking about in our presentation. So communication as a term comes from Latin, and it basically means to share or to make common. Okay. By definition, we can say that communication is the art of conveying meaning through mutually understood signs and language. Okay, so when we are communicating, we are transmitting information. This information can be in terms of ideas, in terms of symbols, in terms of gestures, in terms of attitude. So we are basically transmitting information from one person to the other. So we can communicate through different channels. Uh, we have what we call mainstream media, which basically means the radio, the television, the newspapers. That's media. And then these days we have what we call social media. platforms, which are platforms which allow people to connect with others. So we have Facebook, we have LinkedIn, we have Twitter, which is now called X, Instagram, YouTube, and others. And then we can also communicate via email, which requires internet. We can communicate using our phones based on the network that is available to us. Okay, so those are different channels of communication. Again, you can also have communication that is basically from one person to the other through what you can call your social network. Take a friend telling a friend. That's also a channel of communication. So the steps of communication can be simplified in the format that you have to have the intent to communicate. So you have that intention to communicate, and then you compose the message. The message can be in form of words, it can be in form of sound, it can be in form of images or photos. Okay, it can be any sound. Okay, so you compose that message, and then you basically encode. That message that you're sending should have a meaning to it, that is encoding, and then you transmit the message, and then the message now reaches the receiver. The receiver has to interpret the message. That is what we call decoding, and then they can respond to you after interpreting the message. So communication is not static. Communication is always dynamic. It keeps changing. It is complex. It is affected by multiple factors. So there are a lot of factors that affects communication. It is two-way. If I communicate to you, then you keep quiet, doesn't mean you're not communicating. This is to say that even silence communicates. Okay, so no one cannot communicate. Okay, you can't be seated there and you're quiet and then you think you're not communicating. Even your silence communicates. Your body language communicates. Okay, your posture, your emotions communicate. Okay, so it involves code and information sharing. Okay, this is to say that messages cannot only be in, let us say, words, but they can also be in other forms. It can be figures that communicate something else. Okay, that is codes. That's what we mean by codes. So people can be communicating with one another through codes. They can be letters, or they can be figures, or they can even be symbols. But they use that to communicate. Communication can take place between people or amongst people, but also it can take place even in animals. Just like we have people communicating to animals, and then animals also communicating to us. Okay, when a dog is barking, it is communicating that there is someone who is there, and then you, as the person, you respond appropriately. So communication is irreversible. This is to say that if you communicate, if a message is passed, you can't reverse it. It can't. You cannot uncommunicate. You cannot uncommunicate. Okay. So communication is irreversible. Just like when you send an email, when the email has gone, it has gone. You can't delete it. You can't retrieve it back. It is already with the recipient. You can delete it from your sent messages, but it has already gone. So communication generally is irreversible. Okay, you cannot uncommunicate. That's the point. The elements of communication include the source, the receiver, the channel, the message, the noise, and then the feedback. That's basically what we call the basic mode of communication, which has those elements. We shall look at them later on. So we come to the functions of communication. I believe that one's success can be largely attributed to communication. Your success as a professional is largely attributed to your ability to communicate effectively. Because I believe that most of the things that you will achieve in your professional life will depend on your ability to communicate well. When you communicate well, you can win friends, you can win favors, you can ask for what you want and pursue it and even get it. Okay, so communication is an important skill that you need to get. It allows you to maintain good relations with your partner, with your parents, with your supervisor, with your colleagues at work, with your community members. Okay, so it's very, very important, and I can't really go into each and every function of communication here. So communication can be verbal or non-verbal. Okay, this is to say that when you speak, that is verbal communication. You're sharing information. This can be through face-to-face conversations, meetings, interviews, conferences, even telephone or phone calls. Okay, these are all verbal communication examples. Okay, so you can have the verbal communication. That is basically the spoken language. That, for example, what I'm speaking at the moment. Okay, but you can also have non-vocal verbal communication. Okay, I'm not using my vocal cords. If you're not using your vocal cords, the vocal cords are the ones which allow you to speak. Okay, so we have written communication under the non-vocal verbal communication. So even sign language and finger spelling are examples of that. Then we have what you call paralanguage features. Okay, these are features that enhance spoken communication without using words. They allow you to emphasize points in your verbal communication. Things like the pitch, the voice quality, the amplitude, and the rate, the prosody. These are very important in enhancing the message that you're actually delivering. Okay, so you can elevate your voice to emphasize a given point, or you can lower your voice still again to emphasize message that you want to pass over. Okay, so they also convey issues to do with attitude, emotions, and even shades of meaning. So nonverbal communication basically employs body language and gestures. Okay, so the body language portrays how you feel, what you're going through in terms of emotions and attitude, and also thoughts. Okay, sometimes it can be cautious or subconscious. Okay, So when you are, for example, having a meeting with somebody, and maybe you're meeting that person for the first time, how you conduct yourself will demonstrate whether you are at ease or you you feel pressured, you feel uneasy, or you can easily go along with the person in the conversation. So these can be things that you may not notice, okay, but they're basically communicating about you. That's why actually we say that you cannot not communicate. You cannot not communicate. You cannot decide not to communicate, because if you decide not to communicate, your body will communicate. Okay. So if you see presidents meeting, let us say the president of US meeting the president of let us say the president of maybe South Sudan, or even any other country, president of Kenya. The pictures that are always taken, they are of very good, they are very important, because they help us analyze whether the conversations that these people are having, or these people have had before, progressive conversations, or they are conversations that portray that they are antagonistic. Okay, so verbal, non-verbal communication, body language is very important for such things. So even when you go for an interview, how you carry yourself, how you sit, how you look at people interviewing you, how you fold your hands. For example, the picture that we have here, the person is folding their arms. What does that portray? Usually, when the person folds their hands, they are inward. They are not willing to open up and interact with people. Okay, they they are not expansive. They are reserved. Okay, so that's an example of non-verbal communication in terms of body language. So usually when you meet people, be very critical on their body language, because their body language conveys 55% of the message that they are conveying to you. So the ones actually may have 70%, and then the tone of the voice carries 38%. Okay, so this illustrates that body language is very, very, very key. So you should be very cautious about your body language. You should also be mindful that your body language is consistent with the words that you speak. Okay, you can't have a reserved posture while you're expressing being just a minute. Okay. You can't be in a reserved posture, yet you are speaking words that portray you as being friendly, outspoken, and things like that. That is misalignment, okay, and it brings out issues of misinterpretation. So that means that your body language and the ones that you speak should be in alignment. It should be in alignment. Okay, so that's very, very important. That's what we mean by consistency there. Eye contact. Let's look at the different non-verbal communication elements. So how you sit, how you stand, that that is posture, how you move, okay, your gestures while giving speech. These are elements of nonverbal communication. Eye contact is very important. Um, Orientation. Are you facing the audience, or you're giving the audience your back? What is your orientation to the people that are listening to you? Okay? Are you focused on the screen? Usually when we tell students to present to fellow students, their eyes are fixed on the computer screen and they don't look at the audience. Okay? Your ability to present yourself, how you dress up, is very important. How you express emotions, these are also very important non-verbal communication. Okay, so for example, we shall give you a presentation in your exams and say, listen, watch this presentation and identify areas where body language was used appropriately or inappropriately. Where do we have consistency or alignment in body language and what is being communicated? And where do we have misalignment of body language and what is being communicated? So body language is very key because it reveals what one is going through in terms of feelings. So you look at issues to do with hand, hand gestures, facial expression, eye movement. All these provide you with insights on what the person is going through. For example, if you the picture that we have on the screen illustrates that the picture that you have on the screen illustrates that these people actually are going through an emotional issue, and perhaps they are not settled, okay, and they need to address that issue. Okay, so that is what you basically see there. Body language is very important, especially in relationships. It tells you whether uh, people are actually emotional attached. Okay, issues to do with eye contact, like for example, what you see in this picture portrays affection and mutual love. Okay, so body language communicates about the health, whether a relationship is healthy or it is not. Okay. You also need to note that non-verbal communication needs to be interpreted in the context. Okay. Um, who has opened up their mic? I closed everyone's mic. Yes, Bilfa.
Yes, thank you. I'm helping one of the students with me here. So I just helped him. His phone is not working and he's attending orientation phase. So I actually log in and will be using my phone for that. So that when you see my name, it's not me attending, it's David Mabak from Rumbek.
Oh, all right. Fine. That is Mabak. You said Mabak?
Yes,
Thank you.
David Mabak Machut.
Oh, okay. All right. So I was explaining the point that interpretation of nonverbal communication needs to be done in context, because the way we interpret this nonverbal communication differs. in accordance to the context or cultural issues or cultural background issues can affect verbal communication. And verbal communication can never be universal. Okay, the way we interpret non-verbal communication cannot be universal. Okay, that's very important. Okay, for example, in greeting, we don't greet people in the same way. For example, in South Sudan here, shaking hands is very paramount, and therefore, if you meet someone for the first time and then you don't shake hands, that is a non-verbal cue. You're communicating something very serious. Okay, just imagine in one of the meetings where we have our president and then our vice president, and then when time comes for maybe welcoming the president, and then the vice president does not bring his hand for greeting or shaking hands, that is a very big problem, a very big problem. Okay, so it's very important that non-verbal communication is interpreted in context. So in our case, for example, the greeting, the hugging, those are very important. If we don't see them, we may need to analyze what is really happening, or this a particular message that is actually being passed. Okay, so you need to take into consideration personalities. Okay, personalities who are involved in this. For example, there is one picture where I think it was the Prime Minister of Japan who was skipped. The person, they were lined up greeting one another, and then one of the person reached the Prime Minister and then did not greet the Prime Minister, and then went and greeted the other person. Okay, but later on the interpretation was because of religious issues, that the person was a Muslim, and there are other issues that were explained in that context. Okay, so that's very key. So we communicate at different levels. You can communicate to yourself. I don't know if you're aware about that. That is intrapersonal. That is communicating to yourself. It's always very important to communicate to yourself. How do you communicate to yourself? Let me pause there and ask a question. How do you communicate to yourself? Have you ever communicated to yourself? Let me start with who? Ladies first. Dawa. Open your mic. Yes, a quote.
How are you talk? Yes, please.
Have you ever communicated to yourself?
Several times.
So how do you do it?
It's something internal. You try to compare two situations at the same time, maybe. And you find yourself communicating to yourself alone.
Exactly. Yes. Communicating to yourself is very important. It allows you to reflect and then adjust your ways. A reflection is very important. For example, when you're at work, you do a lot of things. For example, you're interacting with patients, you're interacting with friends. Maybe along the way, you may not have communicated in the appropriate way. So you reflect. about the situation that you might have gone through, and then see, you evaluate the whole situation and then advise yourself internally, like what you have just said. Speak to yourself and change. Okay? So if you move along the streets and see someone's walking while they are speaking, they are actually doing what we call in intrapersonal communication. They're speaking to themselves. And then we have interpersonal communication. This is when you communicate to your colleagues, your friends, okay, or group communication. Mass communication is when you now use the multimedia, mass media that we talked about, the radio, television, print media, and social media, things like that. And then we have organizations, for example, WHO. WHO does inter-country communication. When WHO or UN is communicating, they are not only communicating to a specific country, they are communicating to a number of countries. Okay, so that means that you should be very competent at communication at different levels. You should be very competent communication at there's the Chandigarh. Nice to see you joining us here. Yes, Chandigarh. Okay. I hope you're not speaking when your mic is closed.
Yes, sir.
This is the Chandigarh I know, or
Can
is
you hear
another
me?
Chandigarh?
Okay, okay.
Is it the Chandigarh I know?
Yes, he's the one. He's the one, you know. He's the one.
Okay. When did you join us? Or you are in the process?
I am at the process, but then I was told there is a.
Oh, okay, fine. Fine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, inter-country communication can be carried out by those agencies that I've just mentioned. So the barriers of communication, the things that hinder communication, the things that prevent communication from being effective. We can categorize them as physiological barriers, physical, cultural, interpersonal barriers, language barriers. So let's look at each of these. So the physiological barriers, just to know that we have senses for hearing, senses for seeing, senses for feeling touch. If these senses are not functioning, then we will not be able to communicate effectively. Okay? So that is basically physiological barriers to communication. So if someone is sick, if someone has not eaten, these are basically things that will prevent that person from concentrating and picking the message. And they are basically physiological issues. Okay, so if you want to be a very good teacher, you need to make sure that people have eaten. When they have eaten, they will listen to you. If you have not eaten, you will communicate, but they will not pick what you're communicating. You will teach and they will not pick what you're communicating. So physical barriers, if you have a physical infrastructure or a physical barrier, for example, I'm now speaking to you in the office. So the other staff are in the other office and my office is already closed. So I can't communicate to them because I'm in an enclosed room. The message cannot easily go out unless I I raise my voice. So issues to do with the walls, the doors, the windows, it can be another physical item or body that can prevent the message from reaching the other person. Cultural barriers. Our cultures influence the way we communicate. Jeering, for example, in our country is not very abusive compared to jeering in another country. For example, jeering in Juba here is a form of an exclamation. Okay, instead of someone saying, "Are you sure? Really?" The person will just jeer, and then so if you're from another country, you may misinterpret that to mean that the person is not actually recognizing what you're trying to tell them. Language barrier. Yes, we have 64 tribes in the country, and the most common language is universally used, like in the country, is Arabic. So if you don't know Arabic, you'll find it difficult to work in different places around the country. Okay, so language becomes a very huge issue in communicating with people. But even when you speak the same language, there is the hidden or complex, there are complex words that can be used even in your own mother tongue that you cannot understand. Okay, the jargons, the complex terms, the buzzwords, you may not really understand. The slangs, okay, these are may be complex. But what is very important is not to use the fact that you are rich in a language to show disrespect to others. Okay? For example, there is a tendency of people who can speak fluent English to think that they are the most intelligent in the room. Yet, knowing a particular language may not be the best measure of intelligence. Okay? And we find it very easy to laugh at Mary Boyoi's English than to laugh at Unai Henry's English. I hope you know who Unai Henry is. I hope that's the right name. Let me see people who knows Unai Henry. There are no football fans here. There are no Arsenal fans here. Just checking through. I thought you were going to say you are an Arsenal fan.
So no, this is now me. I don't know.
Yeah, so Arsenal used to have a coach. I think before Ateta came, there was a coach called Unai Henry. Unai Emery, I think. Yes. He's a Spanish. His English was not good. And people are okay with it. But when you are a Junubian and your English is not okay, people are not okay with it. So that is the double standards. Okay? So knowing a language, if you go to a place where you actually don't know the language, showing interest that you want to understand the language portrays the fact that you are inclusive and you are demonstrating respect for the natives of that place. Okay, so if you go to a place where they can't use English frequently, try as much as possible to learn their local language. And you'll find it fun living in that community. So we have what we call interpersonal barriers. Okay. If you feel isolated, if you isolate yourself from others, you don't want to come into contact with others. This hinders communication. In the picture that you see that actually people are close to one another, that promotes communication. But I also want to bring in the concept of what we call personal distance. Who can tell us what personal distance is? Personal or personal space in communication. What is personal space in communication? What does it mean? Raphael. Raphael. Emmanuel Raphael. Yes, who can tell us what personal space is? Kideni, you're quiet. Anyone who can tell us what personal space is? If you're going to communicate to a supervisor, do you go and whisper to them in the ears? What do you do? Personal space.
Can I try something?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. To my own understanding, is like a personal space is that environment you need at the time you're communicating something. So, for example, you want to communicate something that is very sensitive to either the person that is ahead of you, you don't need to make it in a louder voice when everybody is around. So that means that you need to find a convenient place and time, then you can be able to communicate. I don't know. I'm trying.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Another person? Personal space. Yes, Raphael.
Apparently, you know,
Yeah.
when you look at personal space, it in a two-way scenario. It is maybe you communicating with a person or another person communicating to a different person. In such a way that if you two communicating, maybe you can from other people, then you have that conversation. Or when you see two people are communicating, the communication they're having is so personal, then you move away from the area or the space they're in. So you're giving them what? Personal space for communication.
All right.
That
All
is
right.
this is what I can say about it.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for both your comments. All your comments relate to the fact that there should be a physical distance when you are communicating. If for example, I will use this from personal experiences, and of course, this also has to be interpreted in terms of context. So, for example, I'm your teacher, and you are coming to consult me on a question that you don't understand. Assuming this is a physical class, I mean, you and me are in the same place, in the same campus. So you come to me and say, "Sir, this number here, I don't know what it means. Can you explain it to me?" So I'm seated in a chair, and then you kneel, almost your breast is touching my shoulder. That if that happens, you have entered my personal space. You have entered my personal space. That makes me uncomfortable. You understand that? So when you, even if you're standing, you're conversing with someone, and you are you are standing, make sure that there is reasonable distance between you and the person that you're communicating to. That is personal space. That is the meaning of personal space. Okay, so when you're interacting, and also if you're lovers, you have gone out for a date, and then the distance between the two of you is too huge, then that's my, what is that? So it means that you need to understand personal space in terms of professional environment, what it means, and then personal space in if you are intimate and you have gone out for a date, then there's nothing like personal space. I think what could be preferred is that you sit close to one another. But also you have seen, this is also another issue that I've seen when I've moved around hotels in Juba. You see a girlfriend and a boyfriend in a hotel, both of them seated on one side, instead of one sitting across and then looking into one another's eyes or face. What is the, maybe what do you think about that? If you take your girlfriend or your wife out for a date, how are you supposed to sit? Is it opposite, or is it on the same side of the table? Let me listen to you. I see Raphael is smiling. Yes. Uh-huh. How is it supposed to be?
Okay. Actually, person is facing each other one. In that process, I agree that communication, let me say, body language, that is using eye contact and all this communicates a lot in there mostly. And one simple, I say, the same line, actually, that body language is not bigger or much affected, but it's supposed to be facing each other.
Yes, facing each other. Okay, thank you. Another person? You people, you want to tell me you're singles? Or you want to tell me you don't take your ladies out? Chan, yes, Chan? Chan or Alison or David? I want people to be interacting. I don't want to lecture throughout and yes, Chan.
Yes, yes, sir, I'm listening. Yeah.
How
So
should the sitting arrangement be?
actually,
Go ahead.
we can face one another.
Face one another. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, so the sitting arrangement influences the the interpersonal communication. Okay, and if you see these days, if you're going for a meeting, the meeting is done on a round table. Previously, or years ago, the boss would sit in front and then followed by the other bosses, and then the subordinates sit the other sit behind. That's no longer the thing these days. The thing these days is that you sit in a round table when you're having a meeting. This allows you to see everyone within the room, and everyone can be able to communicate. When you are in a meeting, you don't want to project power, where you have the boss sitting on a bigger chair and then the other people sitting on smaller chairs, basically projecting power. Sitting on a round table is what is actually preferred. Okay, so we have emotional barrier, psychological barriers to communication. These stem from a number of factors that influence one's emotional or psychological well-being. Okay, so issues to do with one's perception, negative experiences can lead to avoidance or altered behavior. And then we have issues of emotional distress. If someone has been emotionally abused, they will always be exhibiting signs of emotional distrust, fear, and suspicion all the time. Okay, and then also if someone has never been exposed to certain exposure, they have never talked to a large group of people. They are meeting people for the first time that they have never met before. So that means that their lived experiences are actually different from others, and then they tend to withdraw. Okay, they withdraw and then not express themselves fully. And then we have the issue of stereotyping, which is basically having a negative perception or assumption about a specific group of people. If you went to church over the weekend, there was a sermon. The church that I went to, there was a sermon about stereotyping. And the example was that someone wanted to rent out his house. Okay? So he communicated that I need someone to come and occupy my house. I'm giving it out for rent. So the person brought one person to come and check the place. The moment they met them, they said, no, I'm not going to rent out my house. My house is no longer available for rent. And the reason was that the person came from a particular tribe. Okay? That is what we call stereotyping. So you have assumptions about a particular group of people, regardless of whether the person is actually a person that can be trusted, sincere, regardless of who they are. If they come from that tribe, no. That is what we call stereotyping. So this also affects communication. Okay? This also affects communication. If you have generalizations, people from that place, no. If you have that kind of language in you, then communication will be hindered. Okay? You make judgments about people that are not founded. So we have gone through the barriers of communication, and it is very important to know them. If you know them, you can be a very good communicator. Okay, so that means you really need to understand the barriers to communication. So let us come to communication styles. How do you communicate your beliefs, your opinion, your feelings, what you want others to do? How you do that is what we call communication style. So we have assertive communication. Okay, assertive communication is when you express your opinions, your needs, your feelings confidently while respecting others. Okay, so you basically say, this is what I want. This is what I want, and this is what I would like others to do. You have basically clearly stated that this is what I want. You have not abused anyone. You just stated your feeling, what you exactly want, and you have not abused anyone. That is assertive communication. Okay? So assertive communication is very important because it builds trust, mutual respect, and promotes open dialogue and supports healthy relationships. Okay? So if you don't tell me what you want, I will not be able to do what you want. So therefore, we will have a strained relationship, and that is not something that could benefit the relationship, whether it is a work relationship or it is a love relationship. So being assertive is very, very important. Don't be ambivalent. People don't know whether you actually want it or you don't want it. You're just there. So we have passive communication, which is also another type of communication style. With this one, these are people that I can call the yes people. Yes is all Kabir. Yes is fine. That's what we shall do. No problem, we shall do it. No, these are people who don't offer alternatives. They don't criticize. They are always the yes people. Okay? In politics, you can call them psychophants. They are there to say yes all the time. Okay? You don't want to have these people if you're a manager. If you're a manager in an organization, make sure that people can be assertive. When you have people who are passive communicators, you make mistakes and they'll say yes. They don't offer you alternative ideas. They don't criticize your decisions. You don't want to have such people. And then we have aggressive communication. You don't regard what other people feel. For you, you want things to be done your way. You want your needs, your opinion, and your feelings expressed, but you don't want to look at what other people might be feeling about the situation. So this is more like being dictatorial. You're more of a dictator. You are very aggressive, pushing for your things, but disregarding what other people feel. So sometimes you can have someone who is in between passive and aggressive. They are indirectly expressing their opinions, feelings, and needs, but they are really saying something, but they are saying it in a passive way. Okay? These are people who they tell you something in a joking way. Okay? They may not speak in the meeting, but when the meeting has just ended, they hint on something. Okay? And for you, you may take it for granted, yet they're actually emphasizing it. So these are the passive-aggressive communicators. Okay? So which one is the best? There is no magic communication style. there is no magic communication style. That means that there is no communication style that is the best for all situations. You need to know which one to use in what situation. So you need to understand the context and the relationship. If you are the boss, being assertive may be good compared to being passive. You want people to know what you want as a boss or as a manager. But you also don't want to be overly assertive. You need to give people room to express what they feel like. These are also very important aspects. So generally, as a communicator, you should know how to express your thoughts, your ideas in the most clearest way possible. Develop relationships, and provide feedback when necessary. Constructive feedback is also an important skill. Just know that people may have different perspectives, opinions, attitudes, but you need to respect them. Okay? Encourage teamwork. Okay? Teamwork is very important. It enhances communication. Don't do things in isolation. And then strive for understanding and empathy. Be trustworthy and respectful. It's raining at the moment, and I'm not sure if you can hear me quite well.
We are hearing you.
Oh, we can hear.
All right.
It's clear.
Good. Okay, so the elements of communication. With this, basically, we are going to look at what we call communication models. A model is a simplification of a phenomenon. Okay? For example, if we want to look at how the students join Ristal University, how do the students join Ristal University? We want to understand that. We want to understand the decision-making processes involved in joining Ristal University. We can create what we call a model. Okay? With this model, we are basically simplifying all the processes that they go through to make their decision to join Ristal in the form of a diagram. And that diagram becomes basically a model. It's just, so a model is a simplification of a given phenomenon. So if we want to understand what communication is, we can use what we call models, because they can really help us to understand what is it there that happens when communication is taking place. So one aspect is to understand that communication is two-way. When you send a message, you send it to a person who will receive it and decode the message. And then that person will send message back to you. So it is two-way. So understanding this kind of model or this kind of communication mechanism is very, very key, because it provides you with an insight of who is involved in communication and when, and how communication actually functions. In the simplest way, we can say that communication has the sender, the receiver, message, channel, and then the feedback. That's the simplest communication model. So if you ask you to mention the elements of communication, those are the ones you should be saying. So the sender is where the message originates from. This person should have the necessity to communicate to you There should be an intent for them to make that communication. We can call them encoder. The sender can be called an encoder because the message that they want to pass will have to be passed either through spoken words or through written words or through signs or symbols. The packaging of that message is what we call encoding. So transforming the person's thoughts, ideas, perception, attitude into words is what we call encoding. And then the receiver will decode the message. The receiver will decode the message. So the receiver will interpret the message, therefore make meaning out of the message. Okay? So if you don't encode properly, then the decoding will also be difficult. Or the person will not get the right message from the right meaning out of the message sent. And then the noise. The noise is basically the barriers of communication. It means that it interferes with the way messages are transmitted from the sender to the receiver. Therefore, we should deal with the noise associated. The noise can be internal or external from the surrounding. So the message can come in a variety of symbols, a variety of signs. Okay? And it is very, very, very important element of communication. So it can be written, it can be oral, it can be visual, it can be symbolic. Okay? The message is perceived by the receiver, not just intended by the sender. The channels of communication, we already talked about them earlier on I think it was the second slide. When the person receives the message, they need to give a response back to the receiver. This is very important for effective communication. The feedback allows you to know that the message that you sent was interpreted in the right way. If the receiver does not send you a reply, it has a lot of implications. It means a lot of things. Either they have not understood your message, either they have understood your message and ignored it, or any other thing associated with that message. So, we have looked at the simplest model of communication, which you said it has the sender, the sender, the receiver, the channel. Okay, so one of the models that is actually commonly used is what you're actually seeing on the screen. The one by Shannon Weaver. It has the sender, who's basically the encoder, and the message being transmitted through the channel. The circumstances under which the message is passed may be can create kind of interference, and that's what we call noise. And then the person who receives the message is the decoder, okay, who basically interprets or gets meaning out of the message sent. But generally, we have three models of communication. The linear model of communication, the interactive model of communication, transactional model of communication. Each of these have different perspectives on how communication really takes place. The linear one assumes that communication is one way. You send the message and it goes in one direction. I speak to you, you listen, you don't talk to me back. That's not how it happens. Even when I'm lecturing like this, I give moments for you to speak back to me. So that is the challenge of the linear model. Communication is not like that. Communication is two-way. You send a message, the message is received and interpreted, and then the feedback is sent back to you. So that's the limitation of the linear model. And then we have the interactive model, where the listener provides feedback to the speaker. Basically what happens in an interactive session like this. When I speak, you listen, and then you respond, either by answering some questions or by asking some questions or even supplementing. Okay? The challenge with this is that it is not easy, or it does not show that sending and receiving can happen at the same time, what we mean by simultaneously. Okay? So communication is dynamic, but the interactive model does not demonstrate that actually communication is dynamic. It just shows that the message has to go first and then you get the feedback. Okay? That does not illustrate that communication is dynamic. The one that illustrates that communication is dynamic is the transactional model of communication, which is that at every one point, you, who is the sender, can be the receiver at the same time. Okay? So you have a sender and a receiver at one point, and then a sender and a receiver at one point. So the channel continuously is used by, so you become an encoder and a decoder, an encoder and a decoder at the same time. But the circumstances around you will either enhance the communication or will inhibit or will be a hindrance to the communication. And that is the context within which that communication is made. And basically that context is the noise around. That's why you see the word noise across everywhere. So you get feedback from one another. So there is a loop. Okay, one receives, one sends. One receives, one sends, and then like that, the channel, the communication continues. So this therefore means that communication is a continuous process, and it's dynamic, and it happens in that there has to be a receiver and a sender who can interchange roles. But how that communication happens is linked to the contextual factors around them. Their expertise in communication, their professional background, their experiences, their attitude, and many other issues. Okay, so do we have any questions?